started, Cade.
Hey, Dan.
Hey, Cade, what's up?
Welcome to episode 2 of Concerning Gaming.
Still trying
Today,
to wrap the words around your tongue.
yes, it's not concerning hobbits. Believe me, I know that for a fact. I've never made that mistake.
I typed in concerned gaming a few times on, like, when I'm typing up our documents or something like that. I put concerned gaming. I'm like, ugh, that's not it.
Sounds like you're very worried about how much time you're spending gaming. Now, is it too much or too little?
It's certainly too little, but I don't really have the time to squeeze in anything else.
No, unless we don't sleep as much as we already do,
Yeah.
which isn't going to work well for me.
That's true. I think there's pills for that.
I got 10 hours last night. That was nice.
Well, you also do a lot.
That's
You
true.
exercise a lot more than I do. Therefore, I think I require less sleep.
Man, do you think our ancestors...
Yeah? Keep going. What are you trying to say?
Well, when our ancestors obviously had to run a lot to eat and catch their food. I mean, they didn't just come to them in a grocery store. I'm talking thousands of years ago.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So
we've evolved.
But they probably didn't get as much sleep because they were constantly afraid of being eaten. Now explain. So how does that work in your worldview?
What you're saying? Okay, so you're saying
I'm out there running 7 miles and I'm getting tired and I sleep 10 hours. But our ancestors are out there running 50 trying to kill animals.
Yeah. And I actually heard a long time ago that we are the longest distance runners of all mammals before getting exhausted. So, for example, we're not the fastest, but cheetahs, for example, can only run, I don't know, 3 miles, whatever it may be at top speed. Humans, at least long ago, so what I'm told is that's why we were such good hunters, is because we could track a pack of animals and they would get tired before humans would. So it's not that we were faster, and obviously we had, flanking techniques that we developed over time, but it's the fact that we could last longer in a hunt.
You just tire them out.
Yeah, exactly.
You just tucker them out.
Yeah, because the endurance of humans was a lot higher. I don't know how that's possible, being bipedal. You'd think with less legs, you have more energy per leg, as opposed to spiders.
Your EPL, for example.
Your what?
Your EPL, energy per leg. Your EPL is a lot higher.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. That's a new unit.
Speaking of cheetahs, you ever seen the cheetahs, they run, but their tail, it swishes from side to side to prevent their momentum from causing them to, like, tip over when they do turns. It's like if they're taking a left turn, they're I don't know which way it goes, but their tail will, like, fly to one side and almost, like, wraps around their body,
While
like
they're
back
running?
towards their leg. Yeah, it's like a stabilizer as they track a deer. So if you're watching a deer go, like, left, right, and the cheetah's doing the same thing, its tail behind it's going left, right, to, like, counter out the momentum of its body so that it can stay streamlined and win.
That's awesome.
Animals are so much cooler.
Yeah.
But we can outrun it.
We
over
can
time.
outrun it. Yeah. It'll go straight, but it doesn't matter because eventually going straight, it'll tire. But it would be really neat if we had tails. Like, I'm talking Dragon Ball Z, if we had that extra balance. Just think about how much cooler sports would be if every athlete had a tail and you could work it out individually. So, like, the best athletes will be the ones with tails that allow them to, like, spring themselves up into the air.
Like a kangaroo?
Yeah, exactly.
So I had to Google Dragon Ball Z tail, so thank you.
Oh. Excuse you. Shh. We're working here. Anyway.
In the world?
Okay, so you haven't seen that. But just think if you could individually work that tail out. So now basketball goals have to be like 13 feet high because LeBron James will just spring himself off of his tail like a third leg and just dunk the ball. You're right. I forgot he already has a third leg.
That would be incredible. My God.
Or Zion, maybe if he can spread his weight over 3 legs instead of 2, he'll be healthier to play for the Pelicans.
We should look into this technology.
We should.
Strictly for Zion.
Yeah, that's true. I don't watch any of the games. I'm just a big poser. I just hear things.
You are right, from what I hear. Also a big poser. Anyway, this is a podcast about board games and video games. We're here to discuss today a board game called Dune Imperium.
Yeah.
We just finished wrapping up a 2-player game between me and you. A lot of fun was had. Anyway, Dune Imperium is a game designed by Paul Dennen, art by Clay Brooks. Not sure the year it came out, but the artwork is reminiscent of the movie.
Yeah. So we first played this in 2021. I'm gonna assume 2020. We could always look it up. Someone will correct us if anyone watches or this video or listens to the podcast. But no, you're right. And
I
when I
mean,
was actually doing some research on it, so it has Legendary, who's the producer of the film as well.
yeah,
So I would assume they got the rights to do the likeliness of the actors and things like that. And I've always wondered too, for characters that aren't in the movies yet, and I don't know the movies and books very well, but I wonder if they're already doing the likeliness of future characters, like in the sequel. Because as of recording this podcast, only the first one's out. But
yeah, true.
a lot of people in here look lifelike, and so I'm wondering if maybe they just had concept art or actors'
Yeah,
faces.
I mean, for example, I played my character was Count Ilban Ricchisi,
Cheesy. Yeah, he's
who
Italian.
who I don't believe was in the first movie, but perhaps he'll be coming around as the movies progress.
Yeah. Whereas
Unclear.
I have what's the guy from the Star Wars movies?
Oh
He plays the pilot
gosh,
with the jacket.
yeah, discount Han Solo.
Yeah, but he also plays in great movie. Sorry, we're getting sidetracked, but great movie, Ex Machina. Have you seen that?
No, I haven't.
Oh, yeah, that's good. But anyway, this guy, I think his last name's Leto, actually.
It's Oscar Isaac. That's not Jared Leto.
No, but I thought it
How
was a
dare
different.
how dare you?
It was a different Leto. If obviously I would have said Jared Leto if that's who I thought it was, but I thought it was somebody else. With oh, his name is Leto in the dang movie and books. Okay, sorry, Dune fans. I just messed that up.
Sorry to movie fans out there.
Yeah. So yeah, Paul Denon, Legendary Studios. Sorry, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to ramble on about how Jared Leto is an awful actor, so we can probably just brush by that. I think
okay,
everybody
good.
understands.
Okay, good. That's a strong opinion, Cade.
But held by many, I feel.
Okay, I haven't done much
Have,
research.
have you seen
Don't even say it.
Suicide Squad?
Don't even say it.
Yeah.
That's the one movie that in the last few years that I remember I turned off halfway.
In part, was Jared Leto responsible
Probably.
for that?
I actually turned off both because they remade it.
Yeah.
They had the one with Jared Leto where it had Bohemian Rhapsody as the trailer music, which I was like, man, this is going to be awesome. And
Yes, a lot of hype.
and then I turned it off. And then this recent one came out, and a lot of people said they liked it with the shark guy, I think.
Mhm.
And I turned that one off too. Maybe I'm just not a DC fan.
God, DC hater. Marvel fanboy. That's okay.
I don't know.
No.
After Phase 3, I'm probably not a Marvel fan either.
Oh, they're not coming around great, are they?
Yeah. But this is
Anyway,
a podcast.
a podcast about board games and video games here to talk about. Dude, Daniel, what is it?
Oh, so
What is this game?
we actually just finished playing. Yeah, so I'll do a little quick version of it. So Dune takes place in the Dune universe, obviously, and a lot of it takes place on the planet Arrakis. Okay, so you and I took basically the persona of a leader of one of the great houses of the Imperium, and we are essentially trying to gain influence and gain power over Arrakis because, as the motto goes, those who control the spice control the universe. So throughout the game, we're going to be going back and forth, taking actions, basically sending agents on missions to get us resources such as water, solari, and spice. We're going to be influencing different great factions of the known universe, the Fremen, the Bene Gesserit, the Emperor, and the Spacing Guild. And then we're also going to be participating in violent conflicts, where as the game progresses, you get better and better bonuses, which will hopefully we'll talk about later,
Absolutely.
have huge point swings. So that's essentially it. It's a race to 10 points or 10 influence points, and you do that. It's a mix of deck building and worker placement. You're going to be gaining better cards, so your turns are going to do more as you go by. And yeah, I think it's a great game.
It was fun. I agree. We had a good time. So how we played a two-person game, you and I,
Yeah.
which brought in the NPC to play along with us.
Yeah. So for 1 and 2 player games, you're going to bring in a different house, House of Gaul. Yeah, let's just hold that up. So House of Gaul is basically like an automata, is what games are calling it nowadays. It's like an automata version. It's its own deck that simulates another player. So instead of you and I playing against each other, this deck will simulate spots that a third invisible person will take up on the board. Just so you get that feel of worker placement. A big draw for worker placement is, you took my spot. Now I can't go there. I have to find somewhere else to go. And because there are a lot of spots on this board, you kind of need that. Otherwise, there's really not much competition for space without it. So I really liked it. There's an app that you can download by Direwolf Games that simulates it all for you. You just press the button and it draws a new card, so you don't have to actually keep anything else on your table, especially if you have a small table. But yeah, that's what we did, and I thought it worked great. What about you?
I agree. Yeah, I had a lot of fun. There are a number of spaces you can go. I would say there's upwards of a dozen spaces that you can place your workers on. You start with 2 workers
Hmm.
and with an option for a third that you can gain throughout the game. So with just 2 people, your options would almost be endless. It would be
Yeah.
really difficult to get blocked by somebody. But that automata,
Automata, I think
the
is what there's probably people arguing about how to pronounce it. I've always said automata.
yeah, the automata is can kind of like restrict your movement, which makes you have to make tough decisions, and that's what makes the game fun.
Right. And it actually played a part in our recent game. It took the Highlander spot, which is a really, really strong action to get you a bunch of troops towards the end game, or it tried to. You went there first. But yeah, it could take some of these powerful spots, and you really have to rethink your strategy or your tactics as it goes on. So really good addition. It really makes it shine at 2 players because there's a lot of games where you don't want to play it at 2 because it's more meant to be a group experience, 3, 4, maybe even sometimes 5. And I feel like you would feel this way at 2, but adding that in is just a pretty good benefit.
And you play to a max of 4. Is that correct?
Yes, 4,
Okay, yeah.
as it should be.
4 is the way to play. You think?
You know my thoughts about adding extra players to games that play well at 3 or 4. It just makes it drag. And this with 2 players, we finished this in what, hour and 20, hour and
Yeah,
25.
a little bit over an hour 15. Which that was what I wanted to talk about next because we played briskly though I would say. Both we are
Yeah.
both we're both knowledgeable of the game and knew its workings, so we were able to play fairly quickly,
Hmm.
and it was still over an hour investment, closer to an hour and a half. I would estimate that if you were newer to the game, you might be looking at more like 2 hours for a 2-person game.
Yeah, adding the app will certainly streamline it, maybe cut down 15 or 20 minutes just from the management of shuffling a new deck and all that stuff. It handles all that for you. Yeah, I would agree. I think we've played some games that last 3 hours when there's 4 of us. And even though we played briskly, to your point, we've played this game enough times now to where even though we played quickly, it's not like we were making bad decisions. We weren't just
Mm,
going, I'm going to play here, I'm going to play here. There was good strategy. It was a close game all the way up until the end.
yeah. So let's talk a little bit about how you play the cards. So because if you're thinking, though, there's 12 tiles on this board, I'll go wherever I want. That's not quite the case.
Good point.
The cards you put into your hand to deck build have little symbols on the left side that either a yellow triangle, purple circle,
Hmm.
green pentagon, 5
Did you
sides.
say bent?
Yes,
Like it's crooked?
a pentagon.
It's a crooked gone? Yeah. And
And along with some specialty tiles along the side of the board here that relate to the Fremen, the Bene Gesserit, the Spacing Guild, and the Emperor.
mhm.
And depending on what symbols are on the left side of your card, that indicates what area of the board you can play your cards.
Right. And I want to talk about this in the how to play because when we first start playing this game, this and there's another game called The Lost Ruins of Arnak that I hear do similar things. I have not played that one, but it's a deck building slash worker placement game like this one. The way that I like to think about this, and hopefully if people are trying to learn this game for the first time, it'll help make sense, is you have those cards in your hand, but in order to play, your workers are called agents in this game. And in order to play them down, you need to give an agent some orders. So I almost feel like the card or the orders that you're giving him, you need to go to Dune and make something happen. And then at that point, he decides, all right, I have these 3 Dune spaces to go to. I'm going to go here. So it's almost like you give your guy an order and then you place him down so that it doesn't seem so abstract. Oh, I have to play a card and it has to match a symbol, but it kind of makes sense thematically at least because you are playing the leader of this house
Mm-hmm.
and you're sending people out to do your bidding. So that kind of makes sense in my mind.
And there are a couple of different tokens that you can inquire in front of your game board as well. We've got spice, solari, and water. And these are extra, what would you call them?
Resources.
Resources,
Yeah.
thank you, that you can acquire through the game by going to these certain spots. Would you like to talk about those a little bit?
I don't think there's really, thematically they all play a huge part because the board is separated up into different areas. So for example, if you're going to Arrakis, typically that's where the battles will take place. So that's where you get your troops that you send to combat. But since Arrakis is a desert planet, you typically need to spend water to go to these places. So thematically, that makes sense. If you're going to go and do some actions at some of these different factions, like the Emperor Spacing Guild and Bene Gesserit, you can see that all of them, for the stronger actions, require spice.
Mm-hmm.
They're not on Arrakis, so they need the spice. So it kind of makes sense in that regard, too. And then I'm not sure with the theme because I haven't read the books, and the movie probably glances over some of these. But the Landsrad Council is where most of the time you go to spend your Solari. And so everything up there requires Solari. So the board's broken out into all these well thought out areas that make sense, I would assume, thematically with the books. And then the last one that we didn't talk about is CHOAM, which has a it's an acronym for something very long that I can't remember what it is, but this is where you go for spice Solari trade.
Yeah,
I
it's like a
think
trading space.
yeah, I think all three of them work very well, and you're always trying to maximize how much you have of each one to take certain actions. It's a really cool thought process throughout the game.
Yeah. So that's a little bit about how to play the game and the general rules behind it. But let's talk a little bit about the way it looks because I think you were telling me this off air. You really enjoy the theme of the visual theme of this game as well.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the board looks great. I think we've talked about in previous ones. Black boards with color splashed lines just
Yes,
look really cool.
absolutely.
I think with the lighting, this one's a little too glossy. You know, sometimes if you're trying to read something, especially some of these cards, they're not like a matte finish,
Hmm.
so it's kind of hard to read. You have to, if you've got a lot of lights on, you might have to look at it differently. But the look of it's great. Everything makes sense. The icons are all really simple. Once you understand the icons, you really don't have to look up the rules at all. You know, there's little icon guides at the back that show you what it is. But everything on the board looks great.
It really helps that Dune is a desert planet, so you've got a nice, get the black of space behind the nice tan of the planet itself. So it lets the yellows and the purples and the blues and the reds and the greens really pop off the board to just give you a nice experience. The intrigue cards as well. If we want to talk about some of the cards, you've got a nice symbol here, which is probably of all the bookheads out there probably screaming that means something.
Yeah, I
Um,
wonder if it. I mean, most of
it's a
them use
nice
the
symbol.
Bene Gesserit, so I'm wondering if it has something to do with them for the Bene Gesserit, since those are the ones where you typically get the intrigue cards too. The intrigue cards are great. I don't like the size. I just wish everything were big, but it makes sense just because you don't get as much. But they're just difficult to shuffle. Um, the other two components that are really nice are just all of the leaders. Like we said earlier, they have the look of the actors that play them, but it's a stylized look.
Yeah.
It's not like hyper realism, but it still looks really good. And then, goodness gracious, there is a huge deck of what they call the Imperium cards.
A plethora.
I still don't understand how these dang Spacing Guild ships work. It looks like some sort of just large orifice, you know?
It almost it almost looks like the cardboard center of a paper towel roll.
That might be. This were made in the '60s. That's what they'd use.
Yes.
They'd Star Wars it, film it on a black screen, put some white dots. That's probably what they'd use. Actually, I haven't seen the old Dune, but they probably use something different. But yeah, I mean, all of these look good. They could just be people to different activities. Like this one just has a ship explosion on it. They could have planets. I mean, they all look
Yeah, and if you're watching the YouTube,
phenomenal.
if you're watching the YouTube, we'll flash some of them up on screen so you can get an idea of what they look like.
These are good.
You've got people like Lady Jessica, so you get a stylized image of her for person cards. You've got this one called the Chome Directorship, which is a person looking out on a fleet of ships going by. Really, really well done, and attention to detail to probably stick with the movie and the books.
I don't know if we mentioned his name. You might have at the beginning, but Clay Brooks is the artist for this
Yeah.
one. I think there's probably some other people in here as well, but I don't know how he did all of this art, but it is a lot of what I would assume crafted art on each of these cards. Um, I do have a small gripe with the game. I don't know if you want to
Hit
get
me
into
with
that
it.
yet.
Yeah, absolutely.
Small
We've
gripe
been
with the
talking
game.
too nice about it.
Yeah, we are, which it's a great game.
It
But
is.
one of the things that I thought about when we were playing this one is in the movie, at least to my understanding, and possibly in the books, the sandworms play a pretty big part.
Mm-hmm.
They don't do that in here.
No.
There is no sandworm. There is essentially no downside of a sandworm happening. Where in another Dune game, which we've yet to play, but I do want to play this with you guys, essentially the sandworms can eat up all of the troops at a certain area of space. So there's no like detrimental sandworm event that takes place in this game, and I kind of wish there was. It would just give
Yeah,
it a little bit extra something to it. But they have it, they have it on the card, and maybe there's some thematic ties to what these cards do. But I just kind of wish there was more sandworms because in the movie too, man, these things look awesome.
they do, and they provide a sense of fear in the books where you have to take a lot of care to avoid them. But in this game, now to add to your point, there doesn't seem to be any action or result of an action that you take that's going to be detrimental to your character.
Yeah.
Everything is positive or neutral. The worst thing that can happen to you in this game is losing combat to an opponent. And let's talk about combat now, is because as you're playing and placing your workers down on the board, you can acquire troops that go into the combat zone. First, they go into your garrison, which is the stored section for your troops, and then you can play them into the active combat zone. There may be specific names for those areas that I'm not using, but
I think they just call it conflict in here.
okay.
Yeah, garrison and conflict. I think that's what they call it.
And each troop counts as 2 towards your combat score, and then you've got a secondary way of adding to your combat score, which is there are daggers on your cards which can add 1 to your pool, and those are typically played after you've committed all your troops at the end of the reveal phase of your turn. And you can be in battle with someone. You've each got 6 troops in the combat zone. You've got a score of 12, and someone can lay down just 1 more dagger than you to end up winning the first place result of the combat, which can just be a killer.
Yeah. And things like that have happened, and it almost happens every single time.
It's true.
When those intrigue cards are played, or when the reveal phase happens, you never know how many daggers the other person has. You don't know if you want to sacrifice another troop to go into that conflict. It's great. I love the way that the conflict happens in this game. It's not as direct. It's not based on dice rolls. I know a lot of people love dice rolling for conflict. I'm not the biggest fan of it. I think there's too much chance in that one. This one, there's a bit of open information. You know how many troops are in there, but then that hidden information of just the different cards that can be played to kind of add strength, or in some cases remove it. There are some cards in there that are actually pretty cool. Once you see that everyone's committed troops, let's say even in a 4-player game, and you're like, man, I can't get any of these, and I'm about to waste troops, there's some that let you retreat it.
Right, yeah, because any troop you send to combat, and win or lose, those come back to your reserves, to your stock.
Ready with my voice.
The
arsonist.
The Human Torch was denied a bank loan.
The arsonist has oddly shaped feet. That reminds me of Bruce on my YouTube. Have you seen that?
Where he's typing out all the words for him to say.
Steve Carell's big break.
Yeah. Oh god, is that really one of his first things he did?
I think it might be, yeah.
So you can play this game, Dan, with as little as 1 person by yourself up to a group of you and 3 of your friends to get to 4. What is your preferred method of play?
Oh, that's tough. Because this 2-player game was really good that we just played.
That's true.
But man, if we could play with 4 people who know the game really well, and I feel like every time we play, we're always adding in somebody who's maybe only played it once or maybe twice. But if everybody's on the same level, I would love to play it at 4. Just having crunchier decisions about where to go. If everything's taken on the board and you're like, do I wait to go here because then he's going to take it? Or do I take it right now even though it's not the optimal move, but then I deny you?
Mm-hmm.
Gosh, those are good decisions that I love in this game.
That's what makes a game fun. And I felt I had less of those in our 2-player game, even with the Automata playing as the 3rd player, than I did when we played with 3 people when it was you, me, and Nick. I felt in that game I was very concerned about whether or not I would have another spot open for my 2nd or 3rd turn, and it made me think, well, this is my 1st turn, I have to go there now, which definitely had some downsides later in the game.
Yeah, and I think the reason for that is not really a drawback of the deck because they're doing the best they can with the automata deck, or I can't remember how I pronounced it, but it's random. So, for example, if we know that there's a good conflict card up and we know how many people we have,
Mm-hmm.
we're all probably eyeing the same space. Whereas
Yes.
this third player is going to be completely by the draw of the card on what space he takes. He may take a good space, but chances are he's probably not. He's just kind of hindering where you can go as maybe a secondary or tertiary action.
That was definitely the case in our two-player game. He wasn't ever going to, well, I say that he wasn't going to any spots
Gosh,
that were
that
critical,
bastard.
but he would try to seemingly right after you and I took a very good spot that was beneficial to our hand.
Yeah.
And you made a good point there, because in order to put combat troops into the combat round, you have to go to certain tiles. Not every tile allows you to place your units into combat.
Mhm.
And so if there are 22 spots, I just did a quick count while you
You're a mentat.
while you were talking, there are only 10 of them that are combat spaces. So I mean, less than half, if my math is correct. And and that with three people, and you've got up to a potential of 3 turns each, that could completely
Almost eradicate
almost
all of the combat spaces.
eradicate all of them. And then if you had a fourth person, somebody would definitely be left out if combat was a very important play for that round.
Yeah.
And I think combat, what's interesting is combat becomes way more important the later you get in the game.
Yeah, which is really cool.
So every round you flip over a new combat victory conditions, I guess you would call it. What are these cards called here?
Those
Conflict cards.
Yeah, conflict cards, but it basically gives you just the rewards on if you either win first, second, third, and fourth place gets nothing if you're playing with 4 people.
Mm-hmm.
But the farther you are in the game, the longer the game progresses, the better those rewards get. So at the beginning, they might just be, I saw you say it. I saw you flip it. That's why I was going to say it. Could just be money, which is Solari in this game, or maybe some water or something like that. But then you could get into some spicy, no pun intended, points towards the end. And,
yeah, we're talking 2 straight victory points off the bat, and I don't even think we said this. You get to 10 to end the game, or to at least trigger the end of the game.
Another thing I love about the game, there's just so much I love that you see the score, but unlike other games where, let's just say, Ticket to Ride, for example, I'll use a game that hopefully everybody knows. You may be at 60 because you're playing the game well and getting all the long spaces, and somebody else may be at 30, and halfway through they're just like, I don't know if I'm going to win. And then when you feel like you're not going to win, you sort of lose patience with the game. You become distracted. Someone picks up their phone. In this one, we'll talk about it, I'm sure, but there was a 5-point swing in the last game, so you never feel like you're out of it.
No, you do not.
And the fact that there's the alliance spaces, which are temporary points,
Mm-hmm.
if you have an alliance token, can really sway what's going on. And I just feel like that would be so much better at 4. We need to play this more at 4 players.
Let's see what we can do. Yeah, so the alliance spaces, you can have alliances with the Fremen, the Bene Gesserit, the Spacing Guild, or with the Emperor. And you move up or down on those tracks as you gain or lose influence with them with a variety of actions in the game. It's not, and if you put your workers on the tile with the Fremen, you obviously immediately gain influence. But there are Imperium cards, there are intrigue cards, there are conflict cards that can also allow you to gain or lose influence. Multitude of ways to get that. And when the first person to gain 4 influence with any of the factions acquires a victory point from that faction. And but if somebody passes you up on that track, they get it from you. So that's just a 2-point swing right there. You gain the point and they lose the point. Those can be traded back and forth.
Yeah.
I mean, as many times as you want throughout the game.
Well, there is a hard limit, just to correct you a little bit there.
Oh, really?
Whenever you reach the top, no one can pass you up. So you maintain that alliance card the alliance token the entire time.
So as long as you don't play cards to pull you down that track,
that's true.
You've secured it for the rest of the game. Okay, interesting. I didn't think about that.
That never really comes up. I don't think since we've played, no one's ever gotten that high because most people are trying to spread out among the tracks because that's how you get more points. Because each one can give you up to 2 points. But yeah, that might come up in some games, but very rarely.
The player interaction in this game, I feel, is kind of at a minimum, other than the fact that you're fighting over worker placement tiles. I felt that, especially in our two-player game with the automata, it was really just me against the board until we got into the combat phase. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I'm kind of mixed on that one because, as you probably know, I hate games where you're staring at your own spot the entire time. I probably get flack for this. I think I might have said it in the last one, but Wingspan, for example, which is a good game, just has you staring at your own little area the entire time. And in this game, you have no area besides just where you keep your resources. You're not building a tableau this whole time that you're looking at, and no one else is really going, "Oh, are you okay? No, you're not doing anything over there." Everything's on the board, and
Mm-hmm.
I like that the best. I like games where the focus is on the board and less about building your own little thing.
I guess what also differentiates it from Wingspan and other games that are similar to it is you're not building up to a score, to a random score that you don't know what the top score could be,
Mhm.
and just hoping that you have more than the person sitting next to you. And so then the only thing you would do when you look at somebody else's tableau is try to go, they got about 50 points over there or something.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll try to get more than that. But in here, you can see the victory points on the scale on the right side of the board. You know where you're at, you know where everyone else is at, and you know about what they can be at the end of the round
Yeah.
or at the end of a couple of rounds, and you know how many points you got to acquire and what you need to do.
Yeah, I think that portion is really cool too because, like we said, it's only 10 points. Now we haven't played the longer version. When you get the expansion, which we've played with, but not this time, you can do an epic version where you play to 14,
Yep.
which I'll talk about in just a second when I finish this point. I don't want to get too distracted. Um, but that makes it so cutthroat, just because every single new round that comes up, especially towards the later end of the game, you're like, is this going to be the one that ends it? If Cade gets that, is he going to get those 2 points? Or how do I squeeze out as much points from the sandworm's teeth, to edge in front of somebody else?
Yeah.
And I think that's what I like. So yeah, you're right. It's less take that in your face interaction, but I do like that everyone's playing centrally on one board, um,
Yeah.
which I find is really cool. But there is a downside to player interaction, is where when people are interacting with you like that, especially for games with combat, you could destroy someone else, and then that person just feels deflated. Like,
Yeah.
they just destroyed all my troops. Now I'm screwed. The conflict in this one, everyone loses their troops, so you don't feel that bad. You just feel like, I didn't quite get it, but they lose their troops too. It's not like they just eat you up.
Well, there's certainly a learning curve to this game in that regard because if you don't understand at the beginning how important and how critical it is to win combat, if you're not prepared with troops in your garrison to go into combat with at least a chance to get first and
Mhm.
maybe guarantee you at least scoring points, because the second and third options on these cards are not terrible. When we look in the end game, one of these cards we're showing on the board right here was a chance for 3 points if you came in first, but even if you came in second, you got a point.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, that's a pretty good
Yeah.
that's a pretty good secondary second
Economic
course right there.
economic supremacy is the name of that one, and yeah, the point swings that you get in battle are great. But I wonder, we haven't. I don't know if we've tried it. You've tried it one time where your strategy is not really for the conflict, maybe until the end, but you probably could have a variety of different strategies by going for just the alliances, depending on what kind of cards you get, what type of leader you pick at the beginning. I think there are different ways to potentially win this game, and maybe we just need more games to figure it out.
Well, let's talk about that because, man, I have some thoughts. Because it starts with your leader. It really does start with your leader and what you're going to do with your strategy to try to win this game.
Yeah.
So you played as Jared Leto Atreides. Um,
Uh huh.
what is his ability? Because
Yeah.
it's short. So let's go
Yeah,
ahead.
mine's pretty easy. When I send somebody to a green space, which is the Landsrad Council, it costs one less Solari, so I can take those actions more cheaply. And then whenever I play my special card, which is the Signet Ring, I can spend a spice to gain an influence on a faction where someone else is higher than me, and that really helped me out this game because
That's a nice catch-up mechanic.
it's huge catch up mechanic. And then once you catch up, if you have another card to springboard you ahead, it's a big point swing, like we saw in our game as well.
That's true. So that's your
Yeah.
your cap.
Jared Leto, leader,
That's your leader.
your house leader.
My leader was Count Rachisi, And when I play my Signet ring, I just gain one Solari,
Mm-hmm.
so quick money. And whenever I had to pay Solari to place one of my agents on a space, I could draw a card. So again, another simple
Mm-hmm.
commander,
Mm-hmm.
but in when I see that on my board, I'm thinking, all right, what spaces can I play that require me to pay Solari because then I can get some bonus. Because I think without playing into your leader's skill set in this game, you're never gonna win.
That's a good point. But when you just read your leader too, I'm not sure about all of the leaders. We have 8 in the base game, and I think
Mm.
it's 4 additional ones, or maybe even additional 8. I can't remember in the expansion. But yours sounds worse than mine. So I'm not sure how balanced they all are. But for example, your special gives you a Solari. Every time I go to a green spot, I have a 1 Solari discount. So I could get that Solari more often than you could, because you can only get it every time you get your signet ring.
But you got to remember going to a green space, and especially in this game, I think the greens is some of the worst spaces to go to on the whole board.
Yeah,
The only time you want to go there
it's for the Swordmaster.
is for the Swordmaster, so you can get your third agent.
Yeah, that
And
priority numero uno.
absolutely, oh
Yeah,
my gosh,
yeah.
the game we played with Nick,
Uh-huh.
you and Nick, it
Didn't even get it. I don't think we
put
got
that
it
off.
the last
Yeah,
round, maybe the last 2 rounds.
yeah, put that off is probably a kind way to put it. But I think I had
Okay,
my
that's mean.
I had my.
It's meaner that you said that.
Well, I'm sorry. We'll cut it out.
Okay.
We won't. Because I think it's important. I think getting the sword master and getting your third agent is probably the first thing you should prioritize in this game. Having one extra turn is huge. It allows you to go to combat spaces to put more combat units in the game. It allows you to go to more spaces to just acquire resources, whether that be more troops in your garrison, water, which is hard to come by, as you can imagine on Dune, very thematic,
Mm-hmm.
or extra cards or intrigue cards, which can be very powerful.
Gosh, can they?
There.
Yeah, no, it's
Yes,
great.
yeah,
It's
about
great.
that.
We do this in every single game. You're effectively playing more game than the other person because you get to take more actions.
Playing 2/3 of the game.
Yeah,
That's a huge percentage.
it's huge.
Yeah.
And the only downside to that is if you decide to play your third agent, because you don't have to play them all. You can take your reveal phase early if you want to. Is You should know that. You have a bad teacher. Is You have to decide which of your cards you don't want to use for the reveal phase. But a lot of times there's going to be some bad cards because you start with bad cards.
Yeah.
That you'll say, oh, it's no problem. So taking 3 is normally a no-brainer. But if you draw 5 really good cards, maybe you don't want to spend all 3 agents because you really want their reveal powers.
Right. So there's the drawing 5 cards into your hand. That's the start of every round. And you can, if you have 3 agents, you could play 3 of those cards. And then the reveal phase is the cards remaining in your hand. So you can play up to 3, and then you play down the cards for the reveal phase. When you play cards as an action with your agent, you take the top action on the card.
Mm-hmm.
When you do them in the reveal phase, you take the reveal action, the secondary action, the lower action on your card.
Yeah.
And typically those are battle related. Those are combat related.
I think so. I'm going to find mine when you... Okay, go ahead. I found it. That was easy.
They're combat related, or they give you influence points to purchase new cards at the end of the round.
Mm-hmm.
And the ones on the top action are typically like drawing cards or gaining workers, or
Yeah.
not workers. I'm sorry,
Units.
gaining units to go into your garrison.
Right. So this one, I actually really liked this card. It was Duncan Idaho, who is Nick's favorite person in the entire Dune trilogy. 8 books? There's a lot. I don't know.
Jason Momoa?
Yeah, Jason Momoa.
He looks very Jason Momoa-esque in the
Because it is.
picture.
So he's got a really cool, and you probably can't see it, but it's a really crunchy decision you have to make. You either spend a water to get some really good stuff, a troop and draw a card, or you wait to hold him and you gain a water for the reveal phase and 2 combat. So every time I drew that card, I was like, oh, which one should I use? Do I have water? Do I not have water? So a lot of these cards are really cool. That would lead me into another gripe that I probably had with it is the deck of injury cards is huge. I wish you could either refresh that deck more often, or I wish that, well, because you can't, I wish you could just refresh it, because when you have a whole Imperium row of 1s and 2s and 3 cost cards,
They're not
It,
that great.
they're not that great. You almost don't want them, but there's no way to just refresh them. We should probably house rule it or something like that. Because
Yeah.
I want to buy the cards that cost 6, and
Yes.
I want to see a 6 card and go, ooh, I need to try and build up enough persuasion points to buy that card so that I can do a really cool thing on a later turn.
It doubly sucks to buy a 2 or a 3 or a 1 because when you buy it, it goes into your hand, and now you've gone from the starting 10 cards that you have in your hand to 11. And then it goes to 12 when you buy more, and 13, 14. And so you're seeing these quote unquote good cards that you're purchasing less and less the more cards you buy.
Yeah.
Which makes the discarding of a card action even more valuable. But I find that that's trashing a card from your hand, which can be very valuable because, like you mentioned, when the 10 cards you start with are the same for every player, and a couple of those in there, they're meant to be trashed, if you ask me.
I would agree. But you're really trying to edge for some of these combat strength, like the dagger card.
Yeah.
Getting rid of those. But the strategy in that, at least I think, and I'm not a strategist Dune player or anything like that.
We're the best in the world.
Yeah, we should enter a tournament. World Series of Board Gaming. If you'd like to sponsor this episode, World Series of BoardGaming.com. We are not paid.
Yes.
But trashing almost seems more worth it early. Because at the last couple of rounds, you might not even see some of the cards you buy. Because you're only drawing 5. Gosh, there's so much good stuff about this game. But you can go here to draw 3 cards.
Yes.
There are a lot of different ways to draw more into your hand. So there's probably just an optimal way to play so that you could see those cards more frequently and trash cards more frequently. I think just being able to refresh the bad cards and get new ones would just be a great way to play the game. Maybe we just need to come up with some sort of house rule, pay a spice, refresh, pay 2, 3. Maybe there's online recommendations in forums that maybe have the same issues.
Maybe add a Solari, because I mean, we both found that we were really accumulating Solari with almost nothing to do with it towards the end of the game.
Yeah.
I say almost. There was stuff to do with it, but it was, we'll get to that. There was stuff to do with it.
Yeah. For you on 2 of the conflicts.
Yes, indeed. But we were talking about the beginning of the game, you pick your leader, and you really want to play around your leader's capabilities. So after that, there are a few directions that you can go in order to gain points, because like we said, you need to get to 10 to trigger the end of the game, the last round. Okay. 8 of them you can acquire through familiarity alliances. Thank you. Alliances with the factions. When you go up 2 on any of the alliance tracks, you instantly gain a point, and that can't be taken from you. Right. If you get to 4 first, that's when you gather the token that goes in front of your game space, and as long as you maintain the highest influence with that faction, you keep it for the rest of the game. So there's 8 potential points there, but that only gets you to 8 out of 10. And this brings me to like kind of one of my gripes with the game, even though I had success with that previously by going up on the influence track. You're required to play combat. There is no other way to gain points outside of certain intrigue cards that do give you endgame points, but they're few and far between. I found, like last game, for example, we didn't encounter any. We didn't encounter any, so you can't bank on those to happen. You can't bank on I'm going to get 8 intrigue points here, and then also get 8 faction points, and then also get 2 points from the intrigue deck, and that's how I'll win. Yeah. So it means that you have to be good at combat, which is something that I don't personally like in board games or any games in general, when there's only one way to do it. You have to do something. And I always find that to be less fun than a game where you can have multiple options to go through.
Yeah, I'll offer a counterpoint,
please,
because I do agree. You could go the strategy of getting factions, and most people do. That's how you get maybe half of your points generally in a total game. For example, this last one that I had, gosh, was it 8? No, couldn't have been. Maybe 6. Let's say 6. But and you're right. You do eventually have to siphon your way and traverse into going into combat. But there's so many different ways to do that. You did it a lot through intrigue cards. You could still do it by going to your your faction tracks and getting alliances, because those actions have really good ones. All of these things generally tie into combat some way. Like you said, half the spaces allow you to get into combat. So it's not like if you went for that strategy first, you can't pivot. I do think there's good opportunity to pivot into the conflict for the last few rounds. Um, but and maybe that's just something that the designers had to, you know, come to terms with. Is it's a thematic game about having influence over Dune. In the world of Dune, everyone's fighting over the spice, so it kind of makes sense.
Oh, for sure, no doubt. And
Is
that,
there a better way to do it? Maybe, but I still think it works.
oh, it definitely works. And that is a minor gripe on my part there. That's just a personal preference.
Yeah,
I still would rank this game very high, and it's a boatload of fun. So I don't let my non enjoyment of the combat, make you think that I hate this game by any means. It's
gotcha,
definitely a fun
gotcha.
game. So you wanted to talk a little bit about the Imperium cards in general. Was it just the ability to refresh them that you were so frustrated
Yeah,
with?
I know we talked about that offline. That's basically it. Aside from that, I love the variety in the cards. It's a huge deck. There's each ones have different kind of um, not thematic ties, but they have their own kind of strategy that they lean into. The Fremen are all
Mhm.
about getting more warriors and water. There might be some that are focused on the spacing guild and maybe trashing cards and moving up on tracks. So I love that every single time you play the game, you could see a lot different cards from the previous game. And maybe that's the benefit of not being able to refresh it, is that it keeps it new. Because if you were to
Mm.
refresh it every single game, I'm just now thinking about this, light went off in my brain. Maybe the game gets stale because you have the opportunity to refresh and see the cards.
Maybe Paul Denon knows better than us.
Paul Denon, you. We would like to interview Paul Denon.
Yeah, come on the show.
Please be our first guest. We'll pay you.
Yeah, that's a great point that I didn't think of because I was just about to mention that we've played this game probably about 4 or 5 times now,
Mm-hmm.
and we never get through the whole deck. You've got maybe close to 100 cards here that we didn't see in our last game. When are we going to see them? Well,
Yeah, that keeps it exciting.
we can play it 20 more times and I still might not see them, which is great.
Yeah.
I hadn't seen that Duncan Idaho card that you got this game before, and that's a hell of a card. You get that. That's a huge amount of power you just
Yeah.
added to your deck, which is nice.
I almost don't even want to look through the deck. I'd rather continuously be surprised now that I'm thinking about it. So scratch everything I said. I like the way it works. Paul Denon, you're a genius. Yeah,
Enough said.
like you said, you've probably played it 5. I might have played it a couple more times, and I'm still surprised by the cards that I see. So that's probably a feature as opposed to a bug.
Paul Denon. Well, let's talk about our game then
Okay.
to wrap this up.
Okay.
We just finished playing a 2-player game with the Automata.
Mm-hmm.
Final score, Daniel, you had 10.
Yes.
I had 6. The Automata didn't score any. Could you believe that?
Yeah. The automata, he fell short.
Automata.
He tripped at the start line.
That's true. We didn't even give him a tile to score
I don't
to
think
go
you
on.
do unless
No,
I
I don't
misread
think so.
the rules.
Yeah,
But
probably not. If you were to lose the game to the Automata, that would be sad.
I'm returning this game. I'm embarrassed. We'll give it away to one of our listeners. All one of our listeners.
So like you said, you had a huge number of your points came from the alliance points. I think you had 5, if I remember
Yeah,
correctly.
so I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yes, 5 points.
Yeah, okay, because the Automata actually had the Spacing Guild
Right.
specialty token. Good
Yeah.
for them. That got you all the way up to 5, and then you got 5 points on your last turn to win the game.
Okay, that was crazy. So at the beginning of the last turn, you were essentially sitting at 6, I think, maybe
Yeah.
6, maybe 7, and you were like, "This."
I was at 7.
Okay, this economic supremacy card came up that we talked about earlier, and this could potentially get you 3 points if you win. Pay 6 Solari and then pay 4 Spice. That can get you up to 3 points. So you're like,
I'm thinking to myself, 7 plus 3, I got this in the bag.
yeah. So I was at 5, you were at 7. You had an alliance token, and I swooped one from you, which
Yes, you
brought
did.
it to 6/6.
Yep.
And at that point, you're probably like, well, now I can't win this turn. And I'm thinking, I can't win this turn either. I still need to beat you in the conflict.
That's true. And I had a strong lead in the conflict. I had 6.
I think you were here at 11.
Yeah, and I had 5 troops in the conflict for a total of 10. I had a dagger in my reveal phase, and I even had 2 intrigue cards that gave me a total of 6 points each going into the round, and you were down at 6 points.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at my hand. I've got a chance to go up to 17. I'm feeling great. And at this point, I knew I wasn't going to be able to get to end the game, but I was hoping to at least get 2 points out of the deal because I spent my spice on something else because I knew I didn't need it because I knew I wasn't going to be able to end the game. And then something happened.
And then the intrigue cards came up. So, little side note, I snagged another alliance token on the way, which put me at 7.
Yes, you did.
So 6, 7, and we're going into combat, and you're thinking, man, I've got this steadily won. Cade's at 11, I'm at 6. Turns out my troops are juggernauts, okay? Because what I did was I blackmailed somebody with this intrigue card, which put me up 5.
Well, you lost an influence on a track.
I did.
And what you did was you just moved yourself down to tie somebody else, but you don't lose that point for the intrigue unless the person
I still maintain the aligned token until you get passed up. So that was the stars aligned, Cade, for this to happen. So 6 to 11. I play my first intrigue card. It goes to 11 to 11.
Yes.
At that point, and then now it's your turn to play an intrigue card. House Hagal, this dude's out at this point. So I think you go up 3.
Yeah, I play my first of my 2 intrigue cards that gave me 3 extra combat power, moved me up to 14. I still got 1
you're
in the holster.
I'm still good. And I'm thinking to myself, I just drew a fantastic card. Not only did the stars align, but the groundhog saw his chef. Okay? 6 more weeks of winter just happened because what happened was if I had a faction alliance, which I just got that turn, I could add 7. I've never seen something go this high. 7 combat.
Absurd.
By paying 2 spice. So that jumped me up to 18. And like you said, you had 3 left and you were 4 behind. And yeah.
And I just I folded, as they say in poker. I folded and I said, "GG, well played."
I'll lose with dignity.
So you in that round, you gained 2 faction alliance points. I believe you.
Yeah, I took 2 tokens.
I
got 1 just because I went on the track, and then I took 1 from you.
And then you got all 3 points because you had enough. Even paying that 2 spice to get those 7 points, you got a free point for getting first. Paid 6 Solari to get another point. Paid 4 spice to get a 3rd point. From 5 to 10.
1 round.
Like that.
Jeez Louise.
And if you hit 10, you play to the end of the round, if I'm correct,
Yeah.
and then that's the end of the game. Well, combat's the last thing you do at the end of a round.
Yeah, you check your intrigue cards for the end game. If we didn't see any this game, which is fine, again, I'm rethinking everything. Maybe the fact that you don't see as many cards just keeps it exciting instead of just completely breezing through the deck. I'll knock on Wingspan one more time, but that happens in Wingspan. Every card is unique, but you just see so many cards. Every round you're drawing, and it's almost an overload. This game, it's not simple, but there is a simplicity to it, to where everything flows smoothly. You're getting the point. Everyone knows how you get the points. It's all clearly laid out. The combat gives you the remaining points, and then you've got the intrigue cards. I mean, it may take 30 minutes to teach somebody that's new, and if they haven't played a deck building or a worker placement game, maybe they won't quite understand it. But once you start playing it, it's smooth. It sings. I don't know how else to describe it. I love the way
you're just flying high after that last game.
Yeah, I think that's what it feels. Well, I'd be saying something completely.
Maybe that's why I'm so salty about some of the aspects of the game. Spicy.
I'm gonna start describing everything as spicy now,
especially when we're talking about Dune Imperium.
Yeah.
All right, what would you rate this one, Danny? Give me your rating out of 10, or out of whatever.
While we were thinking about this, I knew eventually you'd ask me this question, and I was gonna go 9.5. And the reason for that is because of that dang Imperium row. But now I like the Imperium row.
You just figured out why it's even better than it used to.
Yeah, and I'm looking at other games. I mean, there's games that we like, that are always going to be maybe a more fulfilling experience, like Twilight Imperium. But in an hour and 20 minutes that we played this game, I don't think I can get a better game in the short amount of time it takes to play. If you know this game, it's always something different. I'm probably giving it a 10. It sucks that I'm doing that on our 2nd episode, because now it's like, this is the bar to compare everything to, and maybe I should do that from now on. Compare everything to this game, because I think it's great. It's one of my favorites.
I'll give it a 9. Um, again, one of my favorite games to play. I really enjoyed the two person. This is my first time playing a two person with
Yeah,
you, I think.
me too. Yeah.
Um, I had a blast. I enjoyed. I thought the NPC played very nicely and worked in, but it still allowed us to just have like a one on one
Mhm.
battle. Didn't feel like a fight between friends, like where a lot
Which
of
is good.
games
Yeah,
can,
which is good.
and which I enjoy. I like a fun experience to be able to hang out and play some board games. But if we're gonna compare it to other board games, a 10 out of 10 for me is Twilight Imperium, and will never. I don't know if anything will ever come that close, but this one might after a few more playthroughs, especially with the two person, and especially with the expansion, which
Yeah.
we didn't touch on today. Maybe we'll save that for a
Yeah,
later
I'd
episode.
love to do that for an extra episode to
Yeah.
talk about the Rise of Ix. That's the only one we have right now. Maybe we'll get Immortality. I think is what the third one is. The second expansion's called. But I agree with you in the fact that Twilight Imperium is my favorite gaming experience. But I still think they can both be tens and share that same rating
Yeah,
because, like I said, you could play 6 or 10 of these games in the time that you can play Twilight Imperium.
that's true.
So that's why I love it.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. I'm with you. It's a blast. Easy to teach, like you said. The only difficult portion of the teaching, I think, is understanding the leaders. You know, we read our two leaders that we played.
Mm-hmm.
Very simple, very straightforward. Some of them are not that way.
Yeah, and
And
and the game recommends you play with the simple ones first. Get your feet wet, then dive in.
but I mean, I played with they give your difficulty rating on the card. I played with a one, the easiest one.
Yeah,
I didn't feel like I was at a disadvantage by the fact that mine was like a simpler one.
mm-hmm.
I think if we play this game again, I'm gonna pick one of the harder ones to just see how they play.
I think it might improve the game.
It might, especially complications are always fun. But you can start out with an easy one and just jump right in. You don't have to worry about trying to find a complicated one. And easy to teach, easy to play, quick, good game.
Yep.
All around.
Yep.
All right, we don't have any reviews from BGG today.
That's okay.
When we do the expansion podcast, we'll bring some in to see how some others think.
Will. Can't wait.
All right, well that wraps it up. Danny, where can the people find us?
They can find us at Concerning Gaming on YouTube. We'll make a quick Twitter handle, Concerning Gaming. Everything will be Concerning Gaming. Hopefully, none of the websites or anything like that are taken. All the handles, all the usernames. So that's where they can find us. I'll leave a link down in the doobly doos below, which is what some guy says on YouTube. Love it. Maybe in the corners over here, or I'll just do another thing where I just add it to the end of every video. But yep, they can find us there and hopefully continue this conversation.
All right, thanks for listening. Y'all have a great one.